Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh. We are continuing with our series Dawah Ilallah, and we are using the comparative sciences to help us be more effective in calling people to Islam. Specifically, how to call people to submit to Allah. In the last few weeks, we've looked at various different groups, whether it be Christian or Hindu or whatever they might be. But there are a lot of people who are not Christian, they're not Hindu, they're not anything. They don't claim to be atheists, they don't claim to be agnostics. They just sit in no man's land. And it's becoming more and more popular to sit in no man's land. They're not pagans, they claim not to be pagan. Some of them might be a little bit pagan, but they're not deliberately pagan as in they're not practicing paganism every day. And so today we're going to be talking about a strange group, my favorite group of people. And this is a group called the Gothic community. Anyone know the Gothic community? The Gothic community are those guys that walk around with the nice strange makeup on and the eyeliner and the black lipstick and the black fingernails, black trench coats, and they go, ooh, ooh. But that's how they used to be. Today it's not like that at all. The Gothic community today wear bright orange and psychedelic yellow and green and different color extensions in their hair, and they smile and they jump around and go, hi, how are you? Totally opposite to they used to be in the 80s and the 90s. So we're going to be looking at the goths, the punks, the emo kids, the electro goths, the cyber goths, the EBM, hardstyle, jump style, and all the other different groups, metal, all the different groups that we have in the music scene today that have their own belief system. So we're going to be looking at those people maybe who are involved in grunge, and those people looking at death metal. So this is all going to be covered, the strange groups. The ones that we look at and we go, that guy, I don't know. That girl, I don't know. So all of these are going to be thrown together. They will hate me to throw them all together, but because of time, we can't spend time on each group. Otherwise we'll go on for 20 episodes just talking about music and how they influence popular culture today. So the Gothic community, metal, punk, all of these different groups, they have, just like Christianity, a beginning and an end. Just like Hinduism, a beginning and end. They had a structure. Who was the influence? Where did it come from? So which came first? The first group was the punk movement. The punk movement started in Britain and in America, or England specifically, to late 60s, early 70s and 80s. And the punk movement, P-U-N-K, was these little dropout kids that got tired of society. They were not the rich Jewish kids. They're not the kids that went and joined the Krishna consciousness movement. They're not the kids that came from wealthy Jewish families that were out on the weekend being hippies. They were a whole different group. They were another subculture all on their own. The subculture of Britain and America and New York was the wealthy little kids. Those are the ones that went to Woodstock, swinging backwards and forwards, oh peace, 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 giving out flowers, oh let's all just get along, let's listen to a guru, everything's wonderful, life is great. These were the opposite of that. These were the kids that came from the poorer communities. These kids came from broken homes. These were the kids that were angry with society. The church had failed me. Society has failed me. These hippies were, we're against the war. These kids were, let's kill everybody. They were angry. So you had these two groups, both evolving around the same time. You can't lump them together like some people have done in history. They were nowhere near each other. They hated each other. There's nothing the same at all. And these guys were little aggressive kids. They didn't wear black clothes and dark nail polish and everything. They wore different colors, bright yellows, greens, blues, very weird styles. And they were angry. And so they ran away from home and they'd join little colonies. Maybe they'd take an abandoned warehouse and they'd turn it into a place where they had settled. And so their music depicted their anger. And they were into not things like the hippies were into, where they were taking ecstasy and acid, feel-good drugs. They were taking aggressive drugs. They were taking heroin, cocaine, the very angry drugs that made you more militant and more angry. These guys were spaced out. These guys were zoned in. So they're very, very different groups. And why did they become like this? Because they felt that society had failed them, especially religious society. And so they became very anti-religion, anti-belief, anti-God. And so you'll find depicted in this culture, right from the very early days of the punk movement, upside down crosses, pentagrams, things that had to do with the darker arts, occult, what we would call it. We have cults. And what does the word occult mean? Remember I described it a couple of weeks ago? Occult means to do what with your hand? Put it behind your back. To hide something behind your back. That's occult. And so they were looking more at the hidden arts than the actual known ones. And so there were many interpretations. None of them were real Satanists. None of them were really Satanists. None of them were really involved in dark magic or black magic. It was just a period of rebellion. Of course, the church loved the idea that there was this punk movement starting because they could blame all the problems of society onto these guys and say, Satanism. And what happens if you shout Satanism? People run back to the church. So you create a bad guy so your church is full up. And so the church started all these lies about the punks and this early movement saying, oh, they're killing children and they're killing animals and they're killing dogs. Maybe there were a couple of guys were finding the odd cat and torturing it. Maybe kidnapping the odd dog and doing something. But the general population was not doing that. This was created myth by the church to scare people back in. Just like Satanism was created in the 16th century by the Catholic Church. Did you know Satanism was created as a movement by the Catholic Church? It was losing membership. People were going over to the Protestants. And so they created a personal devil that was coming around on planet Earth and walking around, grabbing your cats and dogs and children and doing all sorts of weird things. Scare the people back into the church. Yes, there's Satanism, for sure. But not the version that the church is selling society today. And so a classic case of this created Satanism was in the 70s and 80s where the punks were blamed for everything. But out of this punk movement, out of this early aggressive music, drugs, heroin, there were a number of bands, music bands that became iconic for the day. And people looked up to these bands that were dropouts. They were making good money, but they dropped out of secular society. And one of the subcultures that broke away from the punk movement was the Gothic culture. And they wanted a softer form of aggression. They didn't want this angry, let's break windows and beat up people on the street and get drugged out and get drunk and all the rest of it. The Goths said, we want a more civilized version of punk. And that's how this Goth culture came. They were the more civilized version of that movement. And they never said, oh, we are now going to call ourselves the civilized version of punk. They were given that name on BBC, on a television interview, when a band called Susie and the Banshees was a woman who was introduced in one of the programs, and after that program, they were then called Goths. They were given the name Goth because of having that mystical period, the Gothic period of art, the Gothic period of buildings, Gothic period of clothing. And because the band was dressed in that way, they said they are very Gothic. And of course, they wanted that. They said, okay, we'll accept that word. Just like Christians, we never called Christians in the beginning. Somebody else called them that and they accepted that. So in the same way, we find that Gothic period started around that period of time. They started then becoming Gothic, and then they liked the name. And so the name stuck. And so they started to base their subculture around horror movies and films and vampires and Gothic style, because those Gothic buildings were very creepy. They looked like something out of a horror movie. The Gothic culture was born out of somebody making one statement and saying they're very Gothic. And that's how a whole subculture was built. They broke away from violence and anger and destruction to spooky and slow moving and quiet and subdued and vampires, dark clothing, mysterious, romantic. In fact, the early Goths were actually called Romantics. They weren't called Goth, they were called Romantics. Later on, they weren't called the New Romantics because they broke away from the Romantic period. So we get an idea that these are the dark, dangerous guys. They weren't. They were very soft and very gentle. The earlier groups were more aggressive. And then of course, breaking away from this group, some of the guys said, no, now you guys are becoming like too soft. You're becoming almost girly. So they moved into the metal period. And that's where you had metal music coming, which was more bang, crash, smash, bash. So it was a combination, not as crazy as the punks breaking everything, not as soft as the goths that are like, ah, but another group altogether. So you had these three groups all being very influential on society in the 70s and 80s, all the way through to this very, very day. Very, very big. The punk is starting to make a sort of a comeback with a lot of female vocalists, but it's starting to make a comeback. These people are following it. If you want to look at a classic person who was not a goth, who was not a punk and who was not into metal, but had an influence on people sticking in that, was Michael Jackson. Not because of his music or his lyrics, but because of his strange clothing and his strange dress and his strange actions that he used to do. So you could say that in a way he influenced people and towards that way of thinking. There are many, many other people, and the goths and metal and punks would be very upset with me saying that Michael Jackson had anything to do with their movement. But the way he went with his controversial clothing, his androgynous dress, I'm going to explain what that word means when we come back from the break, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we're looking at the spooky people. We're looking at those odd guys that we look at school and go, I'm not sitting next to that person, I'm not talking to that guy. And we talk about goths, metalheads and punks, and we said that the goths are often considered to be androgynous. What does that word mean? Anyone know what androgynous means? It means that you look like a boy when you're actually a girl, and your girl looks like a boy, but you do it on purpose. It's not cross-dressing. It's just that a guy can appear to be very feminine, or a woman can be very masculine on purpose, but they're still men and they're still women. So in Gothic community, you'll see the guys look very feminine, the girls look very strong. They do this on purpose. So we see that in this period of time where the punks were started and the goths came from them and the metal sort of broke away from the two of them, that they've been very, very influential in society even through today. And we'll find that many times in society when something weird happens, it's blamed on one of these guys. Some kid walks into a school, shoots all his classmates. What are the first things the newspaper said? Gothic kid kills students. Or anything like that that happens to do with like some crazy thing, it gets the goths or the metalheads or the punks get blamed for it. Does anyone have a question on this before we go any further? Because I saw someone raising an eyebrow earlier on. So if you have a question, let's deal with it now before going any further.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Sheikh, you said that Satanism is not actually a religion, or maybe, like you said, it was brought up by someone, appeared to be a religion. But I saw a video which showed people dancing naked round
A fire.
Yes, around the fire. And when someone was questioned, he did not really answer, and he said to the interviewer that, what do you have to do with that? How would you comment on that?
This is the joys of documentaries. You can make a documentary on anything. And I'm not saying that Satanism does not exist. I'm saying Satanism exists, but the church created the idea of Satanism to scare people back into the church. Shaitan or Satan or Lucifer, as found in the pages of the Bible, the biblical version, he's called the angel of light. He's not called the dark, dingy, scary guy walking around with horns. That's the creation of the church. So if you want to mislead people, would you prefer to mislead people walking in here with a pitchfork in your hand and scaring, ha 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 ha? Or would you walk in rather to mislead people and go, hi, how are you all doing today? So nice for you to be here. The second is the one that's going to be more misleading because you won't see it coming. So these guys that are doing commercial Satanism, what I call commercial Satanism, where they pitchforks, upside down crosses, this is commercial. This is not the genuine article. This is fake. This is staged. This is done to deliberately make people upset that might be watching. We're talking that documentary, which was terrible, by the way. That documentary that was done, you really believe that the security services, the CIA, the FBI would have allowed someone with a camera to come into that secreted event? It would never have happened. That was staged. It was permitted to be filmed on purpose. So you must be very cautious of, there's many documentaries and many different films. You have to look what historically is accurate. And historically, there's no evidence for Satanism in existence before the 16th century.
The question that I have is, when you see a lot of these buildings, the architecture, English architecture, or if you go to see many of these rich castles and palaces,
The Gothic style.
in America, it's so Gothic. You see gargoyles,
Yeah, gargoyles.
you call them, I don't know. And you see many of these things. I mean, it's scary. And they are such exclusive houses. So what is the exact culture behind this?
You see, during that Gothic period of art, and we're looking at the 1600s and that, they had this style of Gothic art, having gargoyles. They're supposed to be there as talismans to protect the people. These are all talismans to scare away, the evil spirits. So you have something more evil to scare away something evil. That was the idea. So when the Gothic culture came into existence, they jumped onto that, the modern Goths, the Gothic community you have today. So you'll find that many of their venues or their clubs or their night venues have this Gothic style still in it. But they really in real life are not Satanists. If you go to a Goth and you say to them, like, I know you dress creepy and you look very weird and all the rest of it, are you a Satanist? You'll go, please man, Satanism doesn't even exist. And you say, what do you mean by that? And you say, well, if I had to be a Satanist, the idea of Satanism is to say that there is no God. So if I say there's no God, how can I believe in a personal Satan? So that's the logic behind a Satanist. He'll say there's no such religion as Satanism, because Satanism is saying that there is no God. So if there's no God, how can I claim there is a Satan? So the whole thing is nonsensical to a Goth or to somebody involved in that scene. So when we look at these different groups, how they started, many of them became very famous in the late 70s, like Joy Division. Now those of you are old enough to remember all these bands, Bauhaus, all these other groups, they sort of made the Gothic community what it is today. Now today things have changed a lot. The music is not the same as it's then. Now it's more electronic, now it's strobe lights and whatever else they use, all these bright lights and things like that. They wear bright colors, they do all these things. But what is the purpose of telling you about these communities? The purpose for telling you is good news on how you can talk to them about Islam. How do we talk to them about Islam? They are very receptive. Don't be fooled. They're the greatest group that wants to know about Islam, of all the groups you can talk to. If you go to a hippie, he doesn't want to hear it. If you go to an R&B, he doesn't want to hear it. If you go to someone listening to popular radio music, he doesn't want to hear it. Go to a metal, goth, or a punk, and he will be so happy you came and spoke to him. He will buy you lunch. He will sit you down and say, please give me as many books as you have about Islam as possible. Are you shocked? I have never, ever, ever had a metalhead, punk, or a goth, or anyone involved in supposedly the scary stuff ever rejecting the message that I've given to them. They've in fact said, please give me more. Whether it be in Britain, Germany, America, South Africa, everywhere in the world they've been responsive. Why is this? Because no one's ever spoken to them. Everybody looks at them and goes, oh, that guy is scary. He must be a Satanist. Oh, that guy is beyond approach. And so everybody has rejected them. Everybody points fingers when they see. When I am in South Africa, everyone laughs at me because I'm the guy normally with all the freaks walking next to him. What we would consider freaks. Guy with the green hair and the mohawk. Guy with pins and needles everywhere in his body. And I'm sitting there talking to them, laughing with them, joking with them. Because he's wanting someone to listen to him. Everyone else has said no one must talk to him. And everyone crosses the other side of the street. Yet he's the guy who's smart. He's the one studying at university, colleges. These are smart kids. These are smart adults. These are people that are studying. They're not dropouts. Most of the Gothic community, you'll find them have got university degrees already, if they're not studying at university. Most of them are smart kids. And this is why they got into this whole subculture in the first place, because they started reading up about Gothic life, or they started reading up about architecture, or they started reading about romantic art. They had an appreciation for things. That's why they went into what they did, whether it was for the right reasons or the wrong reason. So when you come to them and you give them the message of Islam, they're only too happy to learn about something else, because these are more intellectual people. They're smart, so they want to learn. So whatever you give them, they will accept. The Christian has never come to him, so why he's going to listen to him? The Hindu has never come to him, why listen to him? The first person that's come to him is a Muslim. And so when you come to them, they are more than happy to listen to what you have to say. So this is the good news. So don't change him. Don't make him change his clothing. Don't make him change his looks. You sit with him and you be proud to walk with him. Because what do people think about you, Mr. Muslim? They think you're a freak. They think you're crazy. They think you look weird. So when you're standing next to someone who's just as freaky as you, it's the first time nobody is going to point a finger at you and they go, he's crazier than you are. So I'm saying this in joke. It's not like, don't be serious there. I mean, they're not crazy. They're great people. But people think we're crazy. People, how many times have they said something derogatory about you? How many times have they run you down? How many times have they thought you're a Satanist? How many times have they thought that you are a terrorist or a murderer or going to kidnap their children? And this is what they go through as well every single day. So we want to reach out to those people. We want to understand their subculture. We want to understand where they come from, speak to them with a sense of knowledge. So I want you to research a little bit about the Gothic community, a little bit about the metal community, a little bit about those subcultures that we call subcultures. Those are not following the normal trends. It's all about music to them. It's all about sounds and music. And it's going to be difficult for us because we are the exact opposite to music. But we can find common ground on the fact that they are having people belittle them, people speaking against them, people blaming them for things that they didn't do, people looking at the worst in them instead of the best in them, same as they do with us. So they will understand that immediately. That's why I think it's so easy to do dawah amongst them. It's because when you go there, they immediately go, hey, you guys, you're just like us. You've gone through the same problems we go through. People look at us and immediately think we are terrorists. People look at you and immediately think you're a terrorist or a murderer, going to go kill the kids in the school. So they understand this. So we have an opportunity, with no one is touching, to go and speak to them. Is the question relating to the topic or is it something outside of the topic? Relating to the topic. Okay.
What is their belief in God? I'm asking about the Gothic group. What is their belief?
What is their belief?
In God.
I said right in the beginning, they have no belief. Any other questions?
The question that I have is about the Rastafarians, the Bob Marley people.
Yeah.
Hey, music is my religion, man.
Yeah.
So how do we approach these people?
Rastafarianism is a very big topic and a very big question, so I won't be able to answer it in 30 seconds. But they have another God. They've turned a man, Haile Selassie, into a God. So you need to break that concept of who they think is a God and explain who God actually is. And the other important thing when dealing with Rastafarian is also to find the common ground that we have, like the fact that they don't drink alcohol, the fact that they believe in healthy living and healthy eating and not eating animals if possible that are being not sacrificed properly. There are a lot of common grounds. You have to research that. We haven't got any time left. Time just keeps running out. So if you want to learn more about how to do comparative religion and comparative studies, join us again. So for me, Areeb Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
مشفق متعطف لا ينتهي بالحصر ما